Sure.
7:55. Showtime, guys, ready? Good evening. I'm Larry Seidlinger, President of the Board of Lincoln County Television, as well as the Executive Director. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Candidates Forum. A couple of special thanks I'd like to offer. One to Ms. Carrie Lubian, the President of the Board here at Waldo Theatre, and her exceptional team that's helped us here at LCTV bring this to the World Wide Web, streaming to our webpage at lincolncountytv.org, as well as Waldo Theatre. So I would like to have a special thanks to Waldo Theatre. And her team of Eddie, Scott, and Luke that are doing all the technical stuff. A special thanks to my team, Claire Summers and Dave Spence, who put a ton of time into making this all happen. I'd like to thank you folks for all coming out. One thing I'd like to ask you to do is shut your cell phones off and make sure those are shut off tonight. I'd like to thank the candidates for taking time tonight to come and express their views on certain questions. And a special thanks to my friend longtime friend Don Carrigan from South Bristol, as you probably know, Channel 6 News. I would like to ask you to hold your applause, please, until the forum's over with. We'll have a 90-minute question and answer period, and if there's no questions right now, I think we'll turn it over to Don. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Larry. Real pleasure to be here, an honor to be here with these candidates, with all of you. I'm Don Carrigan from Center Maine, been following Maine politics for a while now, probably an excruciatingly long time for those who have watched on TV. We have here most of the candidates running for legislature from Lincoln County. They are one set of candidates running for state senate, the others are running for the Maine House of Representatives. This is a forum. This is not a debate. As we talked earlier directly with the candidates, you can't really have a debate when you got 10 people involved. So this is a forum. I'll be asking questions. They'll be answering, and they are free to answer as they choose. We'll be going through answering these questions by the individual district, and then we will rotate the order for which district has the first answer at the question. So everybody gets a first crack, and everybody also has a chance to come in last and figure out if there's anything that hasn't already been said. Thank you for being here. To reinforce what Larry said, please hold your applause until the end. This is 90 minutes, which seems like a long time, but when you've got this number of candidates and all kinds of things to talk about, any applause disrupts and just takes time away from what we're all here for, which is to ask the questions and hear the answers from these candidates. And at the end of the question and answer, the candidates will each have a minute to sum up for themselves as to why they believe they ought to be elected and get sent to enjoy themselves in Augusta for the next 2 years, right? So with that, we will introduce our candidates, starting closest to me, the candidates running for Maine State Senate, which is essentially all of Lincoln County plus 2 towns in Knox County, correct, I think? We have, not right?
Washington and Knox and Windsor.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
See, I already made a mistake. Cameron Rennie, the Democrat running for State Senate, is a school counselor, lives in Round Pond. Abden Simmons is from Waldoboro. He's a former state representative, and he's also a commercial fisherman and owns a shellfish business and is a current Waldoboro selectman. For House District number, I got to hold this close to read the number 45, House District 45, we have Clinton Collmore, the Democratic candidate. He is a lobsterman, has worked at Bath Iron Works for a number of years, although doesn't anymore, is also a former Waldoboro selectman. The Republican candidate in that race, Lynn Madison, was invited but chose not to appear tonight. Moving on to House District 46, the Republican candidate, Merle Parise, is a farmer and a forestry consultant from Newcastle. Lydia Crafts, the Democrat, is the incumbent representative from that district. She has been a clinical social worker and was involved with the school, but no more. Thank you very much for being here. Moving on to District 47, we have an unusual situation. We have 2 independents and a Republican and no Democrat in that race. In no particular order, The independent is Les Fossil, who's an old building restoration contractor, also a former state legislator himself. We have, sorry, here I have to really hold it close and make sure I pronounce it right. We have Evan Gudkowski from Wiscasset, who is a town assessor, also involved with the Broadband Committee and with some other local issues in that area. Evan, thank you for being here. And we have Ed Polawarczyk, who is a Wiscasset selectman.
Previous.
And is probably going to correct my pronunciation of his name.
Ed Polawarczyk.
Polawarczyk. Sorry, I knew that was going to happen. It may again. Thank you all for being here. Ed also worked for a number of years in the space program, not in Maine, obviously. Then we have District 48. We have Tricia Warren, the Republican from Booth Bay Harbor, who is a selectman in that town and also a restaurant manager. And Holly Stover, the incumbent Democrat in that race, who is retired from Department of Health and Human Services, working in child welfare and domestic violence, and currently works with the Lincoln County Dental and Substance Abuse programs. Those are our candidates. I'll ask you to give them a quick round of applause for having the courage to run. Thank you very much. Now let's get started with these questions. The questions are about the issues these candidates are going to have to confront when they and if they are elected to the Maine legislature. So many of them, in one way or another, involve money as well as policy. I'll start with one of those. Over the last 4 years, the state budget has increased significantly, and one of the reasons for that is that the legislature and the governor finally made the decision for the state to pay 55% of the share of the cost of local K through 12 schools, making good on a promise that the voters had ordered 17 years before that. If you are elected, and we'll start with the Senate and Cameron running. If you are elected, will you commit to maintaining the level of funding needed to keep the 55%? Cameron running.
Hi, everyone. I'm wearing a mask because I have a nasty cold, so please ignore that, and otherwise you'd be able to see my face. Yes, I believe in funding our schools strongly. This is something that was approved by the voters years ago, and I'm glad it's finally happening. Not to mention the fact that between us actually funding our schools at the 55%, we paired with revenue sharing, it also helps to lower our property taxes, which helps keep people in their homes. So I think this is an important thing to continue.
Okay, so the answer is yes, you would
Yes.
commit to maintaining that level
Is
of
it a
funding?
yes or no answer?
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Abden Simmons, same question.
Yes and no. I think the 55%, I believe we should fund our schools, but I think the formula is flawed. I think schools such as Southern Maine that have the tax base to be able to afford these schools that they're paying for outweigh what we're getting. We're getting crumbs in the Lincoln County, and that's who I'm looking out for, is looking for Lincoln County. And we're getting crumbs when we don't have the tax base to support what we have for our schools. And I think the state should be paying us more and maybe them less.
And again, but to the specific
Yes.
question,
Yes,
55%.
but I think the formula is flawed.
Okay. Clint Collmore, same question to you. Would you commit to maintaining the 55% funding level?
Yes, I would. You know, the voters have spoke on it. I mean, what town's getting what. I mean, the voters spoke, and we should have honored that, you know, a long time ago. It's just too bad it took us all this time to get there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Lydia Kraft, same question.
Yes, undoubtedly, I support funding public education, but I don't think it stops at the 55% mark. I think it also means free lunch and breakfast for children. It means community and technical education. It means childcare and early intervention. So the 55%, similar to Abden, it's a start, but we have more. We've made progress in education, and we have more to do, and I look forward to continuing to support education in all of its forms.
Okay. Merle Paris.
Yeah, of course I'd support it. I'd actually go to 60% if we could introduce vocational schools into the 7th and 8th grade in the schools. And I agree with Abden about the formula. It's really not fair to us. We're not going to get all that money in our town to operate our schools. I spoke with the superintendent of schools the other day, and she said that's the hardest thing that they have to deal with is the formula for funding.
Okay. Move on to District 47, Les Fossil.
Yes, and I agree with everybody who spoke before, too.
Okay. Okay. And Evan Gudkowski, what do you think on maintaining the 55% funding?
Yes, the state should follow its own law and fund 55% of local education.
Okay. And Ed?
I agree with the 55%. I believe we should continue with that. Concerned about the shape of the schools and their performance and what parents are complaining about these days. Basically support funding the schools to 55%, but I think there's a lot more issues than just the money.
Okay. Tricia Warren.
Yes, I agree with supporting the 55%, and I would be definitely for better allocation of the funds.
Okay. And Holly Stover.
Yes, I agree. It's the state law, and I'm glad we're finally complying with that law. And I think any time that we can lift the administrative and financial burden on our municipalities by funding our schools at 55%, it's a good public policy.
Okay. So the next question is a related question, and we'll start with Clint Collimore on this one. The legislature also restored full funding for revenue sharing for towns and cities. Those on our panel who are selectmen are well aware of that. That took additional money too. Clint, starting with you, do you also commit to maintaining full funding for revenue sharing for towns and cities?
Absolutely. Russ that dealt with that in the past. It's needed for sure.
Okay. Lydia Kraft?
After being elected in 2020, I met with local select boards, and it was the #1 concern I heard over and over again from my 5 towns was we need municipal revenue sharing, and we need to decrease the pressure on property taxes. And we've worked really hard over the last 2 years to rebuild that municipal revenue sharing back to 5%, and it's something I'm proud of.
Mm-hmm. Merle, Paris?
I think we should continue with the revenue sharing program, and I just as long as it's consistent year after year after year. If we move along and see that it drops, it's going to be a burden on our town, especially in my district. It'll be a big burden if it drops. Once people get used to having this money coming in, they'll spend it. And it'll be for good uses, of course, I hope. But at the same time, if it does drop down, it's going to be a burden to the towns. So we have to be careful how we spend it and how the state's going to react to us, too.
Okay. Move on to our next district, and we'll go to Evan first.
Yes, we should be supporting local revenue sharing.
Okay. No, that's simple, right?
That simple.
Okay.
As an assessor, I've seen the agony that people go through when the mill rate goes up because the state isn't funding their share of revenue sharing, and it's disastrous when it's not funded.
Okay. Ed, your take.
I support the 5% revenue sharing. We're typically an elderly community. Trying to pay those property taxes is difficult. It's difficult for the select board, and unless you've served in that position, you don't understand how there's a bunch of necessities that your residents really do need, and you're struggling always to get them at the least possible cost, keep the property taxes down, and revenue sharing is a big part of that.
Okay. Les Fossil.
Yeah, as a recovering selectman, I agree, and as someone who does continuing education for assessors, I know what an awful position they are in. The only thing I'd want to be sure is the state doesn't start adding in conditions to that money that ties the hands of the towns.
Okay. Holly Stover.
I support the 5%, and remember the time when it had lowered to 2%, and when that happens, you increase the financial burden on the towns, which gets passed on to local taxpayers. When I go out and talk to voters, one of the things they're worried about is staying in their homes and aging in place. And so the 5% is one more way that we can ensure people can stay in our community.
Okay. Tricia Warren.
I too agree with the revenue sharing, and especially for the retirees that are in their homes and want to maintain their homes. And it's also something that can help the young families as well. So.
Okay. And we'll move to our Senate candidates. Abden Simmons, you first.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's most imperative, especially for Waldo. We just went through a revaluation after 13 years. A lot of properties went up in value. The cost of homes and stuff like that, revenue sharing is gonna be a big deal. It's really gonna make a big difference. And Lincoln County being the oldest county in the state, and Waldoboro the biggest town in Lincoln County, it's a huge burden on some of our residents. And I've had to
Cameron
face it
Rennie.
for the last 8 years.
I'm sorry. And Cameron Rennie.
I mean, yes, definitely. Like Abden said, we are the oldest district in this state, and do you know, like 75% of people want to age in place in their homes, and only 25% of people are able to. Anything that we can do to make that easier, we should be doing.
Another question, these are both sort of related to education in a way, and this one is absolutely. The state of Maine is now in a temporary program to provide free tuition at the community colleges for recent high school graduates. I think it runs through the class that will graduate high school in 2024. I think that's when it ends. Do you believe that that's a good step to take, the free tuition? And if elected, would you push to continue that program? Merle Parise, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, as long as it's vocational education that is tied to the industries that we have in the state, where these people coming out of the school can find positions and go to school. And I would support it all along until the point of where it becomes to where it's a burden on us. Of course, we wouldn't want to overtax our system on education by it, but I mean, there's going to be some rebuilding that's going to have to take place to build these vocational education centers in our schools, and it's going to cost quite a bit of money to get the tools that they need to train these people with. So,
okay.
Anyway, thank you.
Lydia Kraft?
Yeah, I believe strongly that education should never be a burden, that it's our community's responsibility. And I can speak as a mom, you know, my stepdaughter's 16 and thinking about pursuing a career. The idea of our family being able to afford to send her to school at no cost, it's an investment in our future, and it's an investment in our workforce, because that, as small businesses can attest, finding workers currently is one of the largest concerns for economic development. So it's an investment in our families, it's an investment in children, and it's an investment in our community's financial success moving forward.
Okay. And Ed, your take on that?
Free tuition. Not an easy answer for me, because I first of all realize it isn't free. Somebody's going to pay for it. And we've got a lot of elderly people who end up bearing the burden some way or other. So I'm concerned about making things free. I'm also concerned that so many young people are studying for degrees that don't provide them with a job that will actually earn some money. It's costly, and the results are not always positive. That's a disappointment. There's so much that needs to be done with our school systems. I don't know where to start, and a minute is not enough to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we may get to some other parts of that. Les Fossil, your answer to that same question.
Yeah, this is self-interest because I teach at KVCC their restoration carpentry program. And so, yeah, I like that idea. What I want to see, however, is what's going on is the state of Maine right now is one of the fastest growing states in the United States, but it's all people moving in who are trying to feed off our existing infrastructure, contractors like me, and there's just not enough. So if we can teach kids to take on these jobs, boy, the pay is good. Our minimum pay now is $18 an hour, and it goes up from there. And we're actually starting through the AmeriCorps program, we're starting our own training program, just personally in my business, to get these people in there. So yes.
Okay, thank you. And Evan, your answer to that question about continuing the free tuition at community college.
Right, so after years of having falling enrollments in the community college system, since free college has been offered to these graduates that have graduated through COVID, enrollment numbers have skyrocketed. So it goes to show that people want that education and they just have maybe an inability to pay for it. But we already have a system that works pretty well called the Maine Educational Opportunity Tax Credit, which is given to postgraduates or people that have graduated who make payments on their loans and are able to recoup the payments that they make on their loans. And it goes to folks that have graduated so that there is a goal there. As far as Free community college, I think first we start with free trade certificate programs at the community colleges, and then we move on to associate degrees from there. But there needs to be more workforce development programming that's more attainable and achievable for non-traditional students and just for low and middle income people for sure.
Okay, thank you. Tricia Warren.
Yes, I actually do support this. I have two sons. My eldest is in that age category that can apply for the 2 years. And he said to me that, you know, this is actually a golden opportunity and he wanted to take advantage of it, which is great because now he's 16 and he's starting to think about his future, which is really important because I find that, you know, sometimes our youth is not thinking about that. And funny enough, he's actually getting into the trades. So I would like to see more emphasis on the trade schools themselves. Absolutely.
And to Cameron Rennie, are you supportive of that? I'm sorry, Tricia, did you finish? Yeah. Oh, Holly, forgive me. Holly Stover.
Absolutely, I do support the 2 years of community college. I think it's an investment in our youth. It's an investment in our workforce development. We know we have tremendous vacancies in areas of trades, in hospitality, in things that are really important to the coast of Maine. It's also, to me, a way that we ensure that many of our kids will stay here and work here because we've made an investment in their future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, Cameron Rennie, your turn.
I really truly believe that education has the potential to be a great equalizer, and I can say that 2 years of free community college can go a huge way in helping somebody gain those college credits without taking on so much burdensome college debt. I think it's a wonderful program, and as long as we have the money to pay for it, we should be doing it.
You think it should be continued?
Yeah.
Is the question?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And Abden Simmons.
Yeah, I agree, but there should be caveats with it. Trade schools for one, and they should have to work in the state of Maine for at least 2 to 3 years afterwards to help pay that back. Because we're putting the money up front for them, they should be putting back into the tax base, the workforce. Just like Les said, there's nobody out there to do the work. They need to stay here. And if we're gonna put the money up front for these programs, they should stay here and help pay it back, pay it forward.
And this is community college.
Community college.
So
Yep.
that fits when you say trade schools.
Trade schools, absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Clint Collmore.
Yes, if we'd have had that opportunity once I got out of high school, I would have taken advantage of that. And instead of being a non-traditional college student at 39 years old. So yes, absolutely.
I'm going to change the order of what I was going to ask because I want to ask the related question. Several of you have mentioned it. We know, I'm going to say especially in this area, but probably equal all over much of the state, we have a huge problem with enough workers. And there doesn't seem to be an immediate solution to that, whether it's hospitality or construction or other sorts of businesses. And we'll start this one with, let's see, we're going to start this with Les Fossil, I believe. And if you're elected, what do you see that the legislature can really do, if anything, to help ease this worker shortage?
Yeah, we can do things if we're creative about it. I'm doing it right now. Every winter, I hire 3 people who have really good summer jobs but no winter jobs. And the state doesn't encourage that at all. Time the state encourages that. Our bills are year-round, and the reason we lose these people is their income can't be year-round. So we should do that. We should encourage people to hire when the unemployment is high, so people can pay their bills and don't go on unemployment, which should be something that nobody ever has to go on in this state.
Evan?
The state needs to keep focusing on workforce housing, number one. Bath Iron Works is hiring 1,000 people, and people want to work there, but they can't get a house within an hour's drive. So number one, they need to focus on workforce housing and more infrastructure where it's available. So City of Bath, Town of Wiscasset, anywhere where there's public water and sewer, we need to work between the state and private development to get more workforce housing, period.
And I'm going to ask to clarify, does that mean the state investing money in it?
partially, definitely, to keep some affordable housing, but working with private development as well.
And Ed, what's your take on that issue of worker shortage?
There's many parts to this. Jobs are available, people are available. Many of them don't have the need to work. They're taking the advantage of the welfare system. They get the benefits out there. There's nothing driving them to work. And I think that's a big part of the problem. As long as people are getting free money, there's no need for them to get out there. We have in this state people who can and do, and they do a fantastic job. We have those who can't, and we really need to take care of them. But there's a whole group in the middle who can and don't. And the jobs are there available to them, but we make their life easy with a welfare program and we become a welfare state. That needs to change.
Okay. Holly Stover.
Our workforce development issues are complex, and they do include the need to have affordable housing, and I think that word needs to really be defined when we think about lower wage earners and what that housing can look like. I think that housing development has to be tied to workforce development, and that includes public-private partnerships and the roles that philanthropy can play in that in doing some development. So I don't think it totally falls on state burden to develop housing, but I think housing has to be part of whatever workforce development that we do. I also think someone mentioned earlier the tax credits that are offered to people who have a bachelor's degree or greater. If they stay in Maine and work in Maine, which means they're paying taxes in Maine, they get a tax credit. And I think that's another way we incentivize our workers to stay right here in Maine and start their careers and hopefully stay for their lifetime.
Okay. And Tricia Warren.
Yes, absolutely. With employment, housing is a huge issue, but we also have to bolster our infrastructure in order to sustain those. We have something similar happening in our area, in our town, in our two towns, Booth Bay and Booth Bay Harbor, and they're working on that through private investment predominantly, but there is always room for more. So I agree. I think it's an issue for sure, but it's something that we have multifaceted things that we have to address, not just one.
Okay. Go to our Senate candidates. Abden Simmons.
Yeah, I get a little bit of a different perspective on it. I think it starts at the schools. I think kids are being forced to go to colleges. They don't really need to go to college. I never went to college. I got a very successful business. I've done a pretty good, very good for myself for a living. Not every kid has to go to college. And that puts those kids that don't go to college in the workforce. I think that would help. I mean, kids are being forced, they're being pressured to go to college, and it shouldn't happen that way. There's kids that can't go to college, they don't want to go to college, but they're being pressured into going. And I think that would help the workforce a little bit. Affordable housing is a big issue. I know a lot of kids are in their mid-20s still living at home. You know, maybe we look at something like that as helping those kids, maybe on financing, zero payment, zero down on a house, you know, to be able to help them out. Look at something like that. Look at, you know, the banks, you know, first-time buyers. That was my son. He bought first house, zero down. You know, he walked into a house, you know, and that's a big deal. You know, helping them that way get the housing.
Okay. Cameron Rennie.
Worker shortage, right?
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have reset it, yes. What do we do? What do we do about the worker shortage?
Yes.
As we see, there's lots of tentacles of that issue that reach out.
It is very complex. The state of Maine has a very low unemployment rate where people are working. And the people that aren't working are a lot of people who are retired and have earned a rest, to be honest. So when I'm knocking door to door and I'm talking to all of these business owners, small businesses and larger businesses, the biggest burden that they bring up is the lack of affordable housing. Not to make an echo chamber in here, but our housing crisis is affecting so many pieces of our communities, and our economy and our worker shortage is a major one of them. I'm tired of hearing businesses, their biggest next sort of investments that they're making are in worker housing. We are a rural district. the answers are not going to be the same as they would be in Portland or in Lewiston. We're likely going to need some public-private partnerships, and some money will need to go towards this.
Okay, Clint Collmore.
I think, this was asked to us before at some forum, and I said, really, I think it's about in the classes, you know, before people are getting done, how much emphasis is counselors or whatever saying, you know, we got all of this stuff that has to be done here, and, you know, gear these people towards our businesses, you know.
You mean when they're in school?
When they're still in school, yes. And we kind of done that when I was going to school. I don't know if they've got away from that or not. I don't follow it close enough, but I think that's what we need to do.
Okay.
Whether the state can do anything about that, I have no idea, but I think it's more of a local thing.
Okay, Lydia Kraft.
Yeah, the folks of Lincoln County, my friends and neighbors, are hardworking people. And when 60% of households in this county cannot afford average rent, we can't fill those labor shortages. And what we saw at the state level and will continue to see is that workforce shortage is a local issue, that we have to be able to provide nimble solutions that fit the problems where they lie. And we saw that in our housing bill. We see that over and over again, that the best role for the state in solving these problems is to take our $600 million budget surplus and allow towns to develop the solutions that they need to fit the problems that they see in their own communities. We'll hear over and over again how, you know, what role state needs to play in policy making, and one of the areas in labor shortage comes down to local control.
Okay. Merle Priest.
Labor is a key component of our American economic system. It's an integrated system too, with transportation, housing. What we have here in the county is we have a railroad track that runs from Brunswick all the way up through to Rockland. And this track is a welded track. It's a beautiful track. It's updated. And we could put bud cars on that track, which would transport maybe 80 people a car, and run those cars back and forth to Brunswick and to Rockland on a daily basis, which would offer an opportunity from people from away to hook into that line and come down here and be part of our labor pool.
Okay, thank you. Quick show of hands. Some of you are involved with local government, some are not. But how many of you? Oh, and if our camera can get a wide shot of our candidates, I guess that would help with this. What I'm about to do. Show of hands. How many of you think that the affordable housing piece of this is going to require some investment by local government, meaning local taxpayers? Most of you. Wow. And more investment, same thing, show of hands, more investment by state government? Some, yeah. So whoever gets elected, this is clearly one of the big issues you folks are going to have to tangle with. Want to move on to a couple of our hot button issues in Maine right now. And we'll start this with Holly Stover and Tricia Warren. Everybody's talking about inflation, right? The campaign ads are trumpeting either who was to blame for inflation or who will fix it. You all hear it as you talk to people around. You feel it in your own lives. What can state government in Maine do, if anything, to have an actual impact on reducing inflation? And Tricia Warren, I'll start with you.
No. As far as reducing inflation, I think that the state needs to look at allocation money. Like, they have to sometimes reallocate things and make them work appropriately, make them work as an investment versus an expenditure, if you will. And I can't give exact examples of that, but there's a few, at least I know on a local level, that could actually happen and make more sense. And I think that the fuel prices, of course, food prices, all of these, there could be, you know, at least for a temporary fix, a reduction in state taxation on those items. That would be great. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Holly Stover.
We have to look at the cause of the inflationary costs, whether that's from the federal or state level, and then on the state level, what can we do to reduce some of the burden to citizens, which is where we're seeing the real pinch when we go out and talk to people. That's what we're hearing, is putting gas in their cars, oil in their tanks, putting food on the table has become really burdensome, a greater burden than ever before. So what are the ways in which state government can assist citizens in reducing some of that burden, whether that is through tax incentives or whether that is through providing additional subsidy? There are ways that we can help to defray some of the costs to local people. And I think those are some of the things we need to look at when we go into the next session.
Okay. Move to our Senate candidates. Abden Simmons, you first, please.
Yeah, I think that the state representatives, the state senate, the governor's office, all the congressional people we have, the Senate people we have, should be putting a lot of pressure at the federal level, because it's coming from there. We're being punished for it. Some of the rules that they've put in place are going to have our seniors in dire straits. And it's not because of the state of Maine, it's because of the federal government has done things to put us in this position. And I think the state of Maine should be putting pressure on the White House, wherever it needs to go. But the state of Maine should step up and say, look, this can't be happening this fast, this quick. Stuff needs to happen to reduce what we're having for inflation.
Okay.
With oil prices, with everything, all produce, it doesn't matter what it is. Oil is causing a lot of this problem.
Okay. Cameron Rennie, same question. What, if anything, if you're elected to the legislature, what, if anything, can the next legislature and governor do to reduce inflation?
Yeah, it's really terrible. A lot of doors I go to, people don't know how they're going to pay for heating over this winter. I know that our food pantries are being used more than ever. This hurts everybody. Nobody is excited about this. Now, as a state senator, I would not have control over the federal government, nor would I have control over OPEC and oil prices, but it would be our job to make sure that we can defray the costs. I like that word, defray. Anything else that we can make more manageable to take some of the pressure off of our regular people, regular community members. It could be subsidies, it could be relief programs, temporary ones. I'm not sure exactly, but anything to make life more livable for regular people.
Okay, thank you. Clint Collimore.
I don't know if we can. I think it's bigger than the state, and especially when you're dealing with OPEC and whatever, and 90% of this turns into the whole fuel thing, and so it's really the feds have to do something, so that trickles back to us, and that's a big issue right now. So,
Merle Parise, what do you think the legislature and governor can do, if anything, to reduce inflation?
Well, the cause of inflation, as far as I'm concerned, is the massive spending of our government over the last few years. And they've put money out there that they didn't have, that we don't have as a country. And this is why we're going to have to pay a higher interest rate as we go along. When I moved here in 1983 into this area, in 1983 from northern Maine, I went to get a business loan. And I walked into the bank and I asked for a short-term loan for $1,500. And they wanted 21% interest for that loan. And that's what's going to happen if we don't if our federal government doesn't get this under control. Now, the interest rates are going to have to go up. We're going to have to suffer with our credit cards being more expensive when we use them. But I think there's some things we could do locally that would help, like use more locally grown food. Less transportation costs is involved in that, and that would give us a little bit of leverage here on our local inflation that we see.
Okay. Lydia Kraft, same question.
I agree that there are a lot of concerns with inflation and little that state government can do, but we can keep money in people's pockets. We have worked hard for our money. We know that heating assistance this winter is greater than ever. We've just invested $8 million. We know that the state has a role in controlling basic utilities and rate increases. There are tangible things that we can do to make sure that we are caring for and investing in our neighbors as a state. While the federal and international markets are chaos, we can look out for the basic needs of our fellow neighbors.
Okay. Evan Gudkowski.
Inflation's a global problem, comes with every cycle, but one of the greatest tools to control inflation is the cost of energy. And whether it's fuel or home or through the utility, there's we need, just like Lydia said, the PUC needs to keep strong on the utilities to control price increases, but there's also a referendum being circulated called the Our Power referendum to buy out CMP at a future date in Versant. And if the legislature, if that comes before the legislature, if it's passed by the voters, it should be respected by the legislature. We should keep those profits here instead of shipping them overseas.
Okay. Ed Polomarczyk.
Inflation, for some reason, we always seem to combine inflation with supply and demand. And those are really two separate variables. Inflation is purely caused by a federal government with a Congress that is spending far too much, a Treasury that doesn't have the money, and a Federal Reserve that creates the money so that the Treasury can go spend it. Inflation is purely federal. The state can have little, if no, impact on that at all. What the state needs to do is to try to keep as much money in the citizens' pockets. Reduce income tax. Let's get the money back to them. The fuel situation. We've got home heating assistance for the winter. This is another self-inflicted problem by the federal government that has decided that we are not going to be energy independent. We'd have reasonable prices if the federal government had not made that decision. The state needs to reduce spending. Let's do zero-based budgeting, reduce spending, and let's get as much money back as we can into the people's pockets.
Okay. Thank you. Les Fossil.
Somehow I'm reminded of the alcoholic's prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can. What we can do is, first of all, make sure the state budget is countercyclical, and that is when we have high unemployment, we use our bonding money to balance things out. We tend to operate as if it's jet fuel that we're throwing on a fire and it gets even worse. The second thing we can do, I've been involved in housing for 40 plus years, and I've taught people how to do sweat equity on their buildings to lower costs for 30 plus years. The building codes don't recognize, we're beyond the point that we can afford affordable housing. At $350 a square foot, it's insane. However, you know what my combined heat and air conditioning and electrical bill is right now? $21 a month. And it is because we invested in solar panels and we invested in heat pumps. Okay. And if we could get more of those in the state of Maine, and incidentally, I have 3 EV trucks on order for exactly the same reason.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I've talked long enough, I can tell.
Thank you. And I think, Holly and Tricia, I think we actually started with you on that, didn't we? So you've already answered it, right? Just for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, we are having a legislative forum here on Lincoln County Television with the candidates for State Senate and House of Representatives from Lincoln County. Let's talk about lobster. Probably no single issue has boiled up, boiled over, especially in this part of Maine, compared to what's going on with the lobster industry. The current regulations being put on the lobster industry to protect endangered right whales, the prospect of even more strict regulations coming shortly, and then this whole other issue related, obviously, from the Monterey Bay Aquarium recommending people not buy lobster. We start this with our Senate candidates. Abden Simmons, I'll let you go first on this one. The state of Maine is and has been heavily involved with the lobster organizations, Maine Lobstermen's Association, the Lobstering Union, in supporting them in their court fights, I should say, against what's happening. What more can the legislature and governor do, recognizing that these are federal regulations in response to federal law that are causing so much pain and worry in the lobster industry? What more can state government do?
Stand up to the federal government. Stand up, say, we're not gonna do this. You have to say that. When I was the director of the Maine Overfishermen's Association, we got to the point with Governor LePage that he was gonna pull out of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Committee because they were gonna take our fishery away. And we fought tooth and nail, and we kept it. And that was one of the threats we had to use, is we will not follow these rules. And whether it take us out of certain organizations, I know Department of Marine Resources doesn't want to do that because they get a lot of money from NOAA and the New England fisheries. They don't want to do that, but that's what needs to be done, and they're not doing it. And it bothers me that they're not. I know the lawsuits are coming. There's $3 million from the governor's budget that's in there for it. It's not going to be enough. I mean, the money keeps coming in. The sabotage from California, coming from the Monterey Bay. I mean, we should be doing stuff about that, which our Congress and senators are doing, thankfully, taking their funding away. We need to be doing stuff like that, pushing our Congress people, our senators at the federal level to take on these organizations like NOAA and the national fisheries and take them on and say, look, if you're going to keep doing this and putting these people in positions that are damaging a $800, $700 million industry in the state of Maine, they shouldn't be funded. And there should be a lot of pressure put on at the federal level for that. Okay. And the state should be putting the pressure on the Congress people.
Okay, thank you. Given how tough this issue is and how important it is, especially in this part of the state of Maine, we're going to let people go a little bit longer than we have been. Cameron Rennie, your turn.
This issue is, I'm not sure you're going to find a more bipartisan issue than this one tonight, to be honest.
More what? More bipartisan?
Bipartisan, yes. Lots of, so I grew up in Round Pond, like you mentioned, which is in Bristol, and that was always a fishing community growing up. My father was one of the very few that only sterned occasionally. He was primarily a carpenter, but everybody else's parents were out there every day, and I can tell you, we all know that lobstermen in particular are some of the best conservationists that you can find. We all know this. They know that their livelihood is based on the sustainability of this fishery. And they have jumped through hoop after hoop after hoop. And they're absolutely under attack. This is an ethical issue and an economic issue. Our lobstermen are small family businesses. They should be protected. The lobster industry is a huge economic driver for the state of Maine and needs to be protected. The legislature and our state government has to do whatever they possibly can do to support this industry. Likely they're going to need more funds for legal battles, but yes, putting the pressure on wherever it can be put on, because lobster is quintessential Maine and we are not Maine without it. We have to be supporting our heritage industries.
Okay, thank you. Our question is, what more can and should the state, meaning the legislature and the governor, be doing, if anything, to fight this? Clint Collmore, you currently make your living lobstering, I believe.
Well, I was, yes, yeah. As a matter of fact, we just started hauling up this week because of a bunch of issues. Not only the court cases and all this and that, but bait has come to an issue we can't afford anymore. They won't let fishermen get their own bait, so you're at the beck and call of the big fish factories. And not only that, we're painting ropes purple, we're putting breakaways in traps, and we're spending, I don't know if I brought one of them with me, but I did. One of these little breakaways that goes in every trap. That's got to be spliced in. All your ropes got to be hauled out because the rope is old, can't splice into that. It costs you about $52 a trap. You take an average fisherman that has 800 traps. We're into a lot of money. So we're getting out of it early this year. Lobster's gone down to $3 a pound. I normally get done the second week of December. We're all done now. So what can the state do about it? I don't know, between the state and the federal government, that's what's put us in it. So it's kind of like...
Hang on to that, because you've only got so much mic cord there to pull on.
Eventually I'm going to throw the whole thing. But I guess my only point is, I just hope that whoever takes over in November, they think about all of this foolishness that's gone on for the last couple years. And I've seen it since 1968 or 9. I started with my grandfather. I paid $39 for a lobster license. Now I'm paying $1,400.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, the stewards of the ocean is the lobstermen, the clam diggers, and all these people. And we've just been jumping through hoops for years and years and years. Everything they want, we accommodate. It's got to that point, we can't even do it anymore.
Okay.
It's beyond.
Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Sorry.
Lydia Kraft.
Yeah, in my role in the legislature, I was proud to serve on the Marine Resources Committee, where we funded the Legal Defense Fund for fishermen. I was proud to co-sponsor Representative Stover's bill to fund the gear exchange for fishermen. We are policymakers, and part of being a policymaker is leveraging the voices of our constituents. I am not a fisherman, but I represent large, strong, powerful fishing communities in the Mid-Coast, and it is my job to use those voices to leverage that power to continue to pressure Congress, to continue to sign on and say this is unacceptable for the Monterey Bay Aquarium to receive funding. All of the pieces that our voices collectively, all of the pressure points we can make continue to be our responsibility. Even as a state, we also need to focus on continuing to fund the Legal Defense Fund, right? The courts are one avenue to pushing back, and all avenues need to be exhausted. And as policymakers, making sure that the voices of those most impacted are brought to the forefront and are the loudest voices there, that I consider that to be my greatest responsibility.
Okay. Merle Parise, same question. What can the state and legislature do that they're not doing now?
Okay. The right whale issue is an emotional issue because the right whale is a very majestic creature and is so very important to us. But the facts being presented to us are not accurate, and they do not justify the attack on the lobster industry. We need to be more active in elevating the information the people of Maine hear about the right whale. I furthermore want to see our neighbors, Massachusetts and Canada, brought into the discussion as they are complicit in the entanglement and ship strikes causing further possible life of marine mammals. I moreover am disturbed that NOAA Fisheries has issued an incident harassment authorization to Vineyard Wind 1 LLC to take by level A harassment and level B harassment marine mammals during construction of a commercial wind energy project offshore of Massachusetts. This means they can take a right whale. After seeing the NOAA authorization for Vineyard Wind, it appears to me that the ruling against the Maine fishermen is willful and unreasonable action without consideration or regard for the facts and the circumstances.
Thank you very much.
Can I finish?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Just one more short thing, if I can get the page to turn here. Well, I'll tell you out front if I can't get this to go. Yeah, there we go. In June of 2020, the Pew Charitable Trust petitioned the Secretary of Commerce to take emergency action to protect right whales from entanglement by closing high-risk areas to fishing gear with ropes, and since then, the crisis for the lobster fishery has deepened. This attempt to change our culture is a constitutional crisis, and it's trying to take our constitutional right for the pursuit of happiness away from us. That means jobs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ed Polomarczyk.
I'm glad I got some time with this one. This is outrageous. A federal agency is attempting to impose a new requirement on the lobster industry that will drive them out of business. They're trying to do this to protect the right whale. Doesn't take much time to do some research, and you go to one website and you find the right whale population has doubled recently. You go to another website and the right whale population will be extinct in the next 20 minutes. Got to do something immediately. Contradiction. What's real? Whale deaths. It doesn't take much research to find that the whale has died all tangled up in fishing lines some years in the past. Oh, by the way, they were Canadian fishing lines, so we need to punish the lobster industry. The more I look at this, the more it comes to my mind that this isn't about protecting the white whale. This is about putting wind power in the districts where the lobstermen fish. And in order to do that, with these floating windmills, they have to get the lobstermen out of that area. So this is a scheme by some large group with a lot of money, drive the lobstermen out of business so that they can install their wind power and make a bunch of money. And it's disastrous to our lobster industry. And all we can really do is fight to keep that federal regulation from being enforced. The lobstermen are conservationists. They do a fantastic job. They always have. Leave them the hell alone and let them go do their job.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Les Fossil, we'll go to you.
Yeah, well, as usual, I agree with everything everybody's already said. What part of politics don't you understand? I can only add three things. One, in the legislature, what you often do is say, I'll follow your light. And Holly's my light, so I'll blame Holly. I'll follow her, because she knows a whole lot more about this issue than I do. The two things that I wonder about is nobody seems to be paying much attention to ship strikes. And as far as I can figure it out, that's a big issue. But as Ed was saying about other things, there's big money there, so we talk about the people we can squeeze. The second thing is because of global warming, the right whale population seems to be moving north, and so the Canadians, I think, are going to have more of a problem with this, and we need to address what they're doing, not us. Thank you.
Okay. Tricia Warren.
Wait, you forgot.
Oops.
I still have something to say.
Oh, sorry about that. Forgive me. I'm an equal opportunity forgetter here. Sorry, Evan. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Don. I've said this at a forum before. I come from a long line of fishing families from down East America, Harrington, Millbridge, Cherryfield, Addison, and I've said, if the lobster industry shuts down there, guess who's moving into my house? So what can the state do? The state attorney general can join suit against the federal government. We can keep on increasing pressure to join more lawsuits. We can put more pressure on our members of Congress to either create an amendment to change the Endangered Species Act and to force National Marine Fisheries Service to use more evidence-based decision-making. But we always need to have a plan B. That's what I was raised in, and we need to be investing more in shore-based aquaculture, period. And I disagree with the windmill statement. The federal government does not need a whale to put in a windmill. You will find.
Now, thank you. Now, Tricia Warren.
If you're from the area, you know at least probably 20 fishermen. So yes, absolutely. I think the state really needs to step it up and have the back of the fishermen. I'm not saying that they don't now. I think they just need a little bit more of a shove. And when it gets to the federal government, I think that they need to be reminded how they get a paycheck, because those fishermen bring in a lot of money, and they're the reason why they get paid to begin with. So they have their back. The fishermen should have, it should be reciprocated. They should be taken care of.
Okay, thank you. And Holly Stover.
I would just add that we have taken measures to do some things, adding to the Legal Defense Fund. I sponsored a bill for replacement gear that didn't get funded, but it doesn't mean that we can't continue to fight for that. We filed some lawsuits, I think 2. We need to continue to put pressure, and if it means filing more lawsuits, then that's what we need to do. This is about our culture, this is about our heritage, and this is about our economy. And I don't want to picture Lincoln County or the state of Maine without a lobster industry, but that is what, to me, is what is at risk. And I think we have to use everything in our power to fight back. I agree with everything else that's been said about fighting back, but it's going to take all of us. And it's going to take a bipartisan effort, and it's going to need to take place in Washington, in Augusta, and in every town, because we're fighting for our lives. My grandfather was a fisherman. The industry means the world to me. It is the fishermen are the most responsible stewards of the ocean that we have, and we need to support them in every way possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You were right, Cameron, and I think there's bipartisan agreement, at least on this stage, and probably across the state of Maine on this. Move on to another issue question and ask you now to go back to what we were doing and be a little more brief. A question where there won't be probably bipartisan agreement, and this is the abortion issue, which almost certainly, Previous legislatures have dealt with it multiple times. Seems to be no question in the current atmosphere that the next legislature and governor will as well. And we start this one with Clint Collimore. Maine currently has a law permitting abortion up until a fetus is viable, which typically, I am told, is around 24 weeks. If you're in the legislature, will you support continuing that law, or do you want to change it or get rid of it?
I would support continuing that law. The other thing I'd like to add, there ought to be a way that we can keep courts and politicians out of that whole thing.
Lydia Kraft.
Yeah, I strongly believe in maintaining safe and legal abortions for all Mainers and Americans. I think this campaign season we've heard a lot of speak about abortion, and the best way to judge is someone's voting history. And as the state has taken up ways to ensure the continued access of safe and legal abortions in Maine, I have supported every bill that's come before the legislature in my first term. I will continue to support that, and Maine has to be a leader that protects medical providers, it protects people who are pregnant, and it protects all of us, because access to safe and legal abortion is health care. Thank you.
All right, Merle Puri, same question.
I think I'll follow Governor LePage's lead on this issue, and he has said openly, publicly, twice at some speeches he's made, that he will continue on with the law the way it is at this time and won't try to change it. However, adults need to be responsible for their actions, and I see it more and more every day how people are not responsible for their actions. They'll come in, oh, we're here at 3 o'clock. Well, your appointment was at 1. Oh, no, my appointment's at 3 o'clock. These people, you see all this sort of stuff happening. And it's true, when a man and a woman gets together, they need to be responsible for what they're doing. Thank you.
Okay. Les Fossil.
I would introduce a constitutional amendment to protect a woman's right to choose in the state of Maine. I think it's underappreciated when we take rights from anyone, we take them from everyone. It's not just about women, it's about all of us. And when we treat anybody badly, we are vulnerable to treating everybody badly. I'm a libertarian on this. It's none of the government's business what a doctor and an individual does for their health care. We should get the heck out of it.
Okay. Evan Gudkowski.
I am pro-choice. I support the current statute as it is. I also would support sending the statute to the voters as a referendum to see if the voters would enshrine it in the state constitution as well, so we don't have to have this debate. We all know that abortion access only affects poor people at the end of the day, because if it's restricted, plenty of rich people will still be able to get it. So it's really just an attack on the poor when you restrict abortion.
Okay. Ed, your response to that question.
As you stated, it's legal here now in Maine. Has been since the 90s. Currently, it appears that probably 90% of the Democrats and 50% of the Republicans want it to continue as it is. I don't see a probability of it changing. I am pro-life. I believe life is precious. I've seen an awful lot of life over the years. Young women who have made the decision to bear that child and have it grow up and do well. Women who have wanted children badly and miscarried. Women who have had children prematurely and struggled to get them through the NICU and keep them alive. And many young couples who would like to have adopted children, and we've made it so damn difficult it's almost impossible for them to do. I am pro-life. I don't see it changing the way it is.
Okay. Holly Stover.
I believe that health care is a right and that abortion is health care. So I will always support a person's right to choose, and in whatever way I can do that at the state level. And I do believe a constitutional amendment will ensure that we have safe and legal abortion in this state for the future.
Okay. And Tricia Warren.
I am in support of the way it is written as of right now. It was decided in '93, and it should continue as such.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to toss a grenade in here and ask another health-related question. Oh, forgive me. Larry, you want to come up and take over? I don't know. Cameron Rennie, sorry, we didn't give you a chance to answer.
Thank you. This is a decision between a person and their healthcare provider. End of story. I am very pro-choice. This needs to be protected as much as possible. I think we need to protect doctors. I love the idea of a constitutional amendment so we don't have to keep fighting for the same rights over and over and over again. And quite frankly, if you think abortion is not on the ballot this November, you are mistaken.
Okay, Abden Simmons.
Yeah, like Ed said, I'm pro-life, but I respect what's happened in the state of Maine. I don't see it changing. I have heard nothing that's going to say that it's going to change. I have not heard one word about it, and I've been to many meetings at the state level, and that's it, I guess.
Okay. And Clint, you already did answer this one, right? Okay. Thank you. All right, we've got a half hour left and about 15 minutes left for questions, so let's go through a few others. As I said, I'm going to toss in a really controversial one, which relates to this in a sense, and that is vaccinations. Maine currently has a law that requires children and college students and others to have all of the traditional, I'll say, vaccinations in order to go to school. Also applies to healthcare workers. Should that be extended to the COVID vaccine? And Abden Simmons, we'll start with you.
Absolutely not. I think the normal vaccinations, I think that's should be a parent's choice. If not, if they're not allowed to go to school, most people will probably homeschool. There's an ungodly amount of people homeschooling their kids now. The COVID vaccination, absolutely, I didn't take it. I had a friend of mine that I was digging with one day that almost died because of it. And now that he's actually taken off all the medications that he had with a heart issue. He had heart issues to start with. We was digging one day, he said he didn't feel good, didn't feel right. I took him home, I said, "You sure you're gonna be all set?" And he said, "Yes." And half an hour later, the ambulance was picking him up, and he almost died. And he specifically asked the doctor, "Is the COVID shot the reason?" They said they wouldn't know for 5 to 7 years. And as of a week ago, he called me up, and he says, "I had my doctor's appointment," and he says, "You're all set, take yourself off all your medications, you are good to go." And he says, he asked if he should take the booster shot, and he says, "Absolutely not." And to have a vaccination in 18 months be proven is just scary to me.
Okay, thank you. Cameron Rennie. The question was, should the COVID vaccine be added to that list of required vaccines for kids?
I think that's a great question. I think required vaccines have their place. We didn't get rid of polio by not using vaccines. Science is real and we need to follow it. As far as the COVID vaccine is concerned, I honestly don't know enough about the science behind it to say if it should be required or not. I would be happy to research it and get back to you. I mean, we don't make people get flu shots. I'm just not sure. Okay. I don't have enough information on it yet.
Okay, thank you. Clint Collmore.
It's parents' choice.
So do not require it.
Right.
Okay. Merle Parise, same question.
Yeah, parents' choice, but it's also, the COVID is not a vaccine, it's prophylactic.
It's what, I'm sorry?
It's a preventive. It's not a vaccination that you get, unlike the polio vaccine or smallpox. Some of us actually do have the smallpox vaccine. And so it's different for the COVID than it is for regular vaccinations. But I think it's a parent's choice, definitely.
Lydia Kraft.
As a state representative, I consider myself a policymaker, and to make good policy, it requires sound evidence and research behind it. I'm not a medical provider. I can't weigh in currently on medical evidence that I haven't seen and it hasn't come before us. At a point that it did, I would consider all of the information provided by research within the medical community to make an informed decision based on what meets the needs of our constituents. Having said that, I consider vaccinations highly important and valued, and as a parent, as a spouse of someone who works in the public school systems, I appreciate the state's stance on vaccinations and fully support wide community vaccination. Thank you.
Okay. Evan, your start. The question is, should the vaccine requirement for everything else be extended to COVID for people who attend school?
I would like a few more years to pass by, get a lot more data for children under 12, children under 16, and let public health professionals make those recommendations as they see fit in the future. Whether or not COVID is the same threat it was a year ago as it is today, we'll see. Universities currently, and I think just the University of Maine system still requires students on campus to have a COVID vaccine. So at this point, it's already kind of halfway there, but I want to see more data and listen to public health professionals before I make a decision.
Okay. Ed, your take.
You called the COVID thing a vaccine. It is not. The definition of vaccine included a section that said it stimulates the immune system to prevent the disease. Getting the vaccine from COVID does not prevent you from getting the disease. To make it a vaccine, the CDC has recently removed that portion of the definition. It is not a vaccine in its true sense. It does not prevent the disease. You can still get the disease even after you've had the vaccine, and we should not require people to get it.
Okay. Les Fossil.
I serve on the Lincoln Health Hospital Board. I introduced the motion at a board meeting to require that anybody who worked in the hospital and was was in front of other people had to have the vaccine. We do not have the right to hurt other people, period, full stop. If we had this approach when polio was here, we would not have a polio vaccine. As far as I can see, the scientific evidence is in, and it is overwhelmingly in the interest of the people of this state to have people, you can call it vaccinated, you can call it anything you want, but we don't have the right to kill people. Now, if you don't want to take a vaccine, you have the absolute right not to, and you have the absolute right to have your children not to, but you don't have the right to put those kids or yourselves in the position you're going to hurt others. There are people in our schools who can't be vaccinated for these things because they're immune compromised. It is just awful to have this kind of selfishness as far as I'm concerned.
So to clarify, you would extend the vaccine requirement for kids at school to the COVID vaccine?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Holly Stover.
I would like to see more scientific evidence about particularly for children. I believe that adults, we have enough evidence that shows that it reduces the incidence of disease and the spread of the disease. It also, as someone else indicated, that COVID shot will keep you from infecting other people, also keep that more likely from killing you. So I support all of that, and it's good public health evidence. As far as making it mandatory for school-aged children, I'd like to see more evidence and have public health recommendations around that before saying I would mandate it for all school-aged children. Thank you.
Tricia Warren.
As some people might already know, I was a cancer patient a year and a half ago. And when I was doing my treatments, they asked me if I wanted to have the COVID shot. I declined. I still am not vaccinated. The reason why is because there are 0 cancer patients that have had trial with that shot. So, that being said, I think that there needs to be more time, and I think that people have the right to decide if they want to take the shot or not take the shot. I chose that. I had COVID twice during the time when I was taking treatment, and I'm here today. So, I stand firmly by my right to choose.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've got a couple minutes left. We'll see if we can get one more round in before we go to your closing statements here. And I'm going to ask a question about, I'm trying to choose between two, and I can only take one of them. Let's take a question that maybe hasn't come up much in the campaign, and that's mental health. As you know, there's been a huge problem, as far as I know, it still is a problem, with a lack of available mental health treatment, especially for young people. People sitting in hospital emergency rooms for days, maybe even weeks, waiting for a treatment bed. And Lydia Kraft and Merle Parise will start with you folks on this. If you're elected to the legislature, what should the state be doing to try to solve or at least ease this problem? Merle Parise, you first.
Okay, Health and Human Services has a huge budget out there. They have mental health institutions, one in Machias and one down in, I think it's in Portland. I'm not positive where it is, but it costs something like $250,000 a year for one patient there to go through this mental health program. Now, this is for the clinically insane people too. So but as far as our children are concerned, we need to now start taking a look at our children and seeing how they're recovering. How are they socializing? And this is the important thing about coming out of COVID, is that these children, if they're not stabilized now, we need to help them become stabilized. And there's a lot of talk around yet, but I haven't heard of anything really directly being done yet. But I would move in the House a bill forward to help these children recover if they're having mental health issues.
Okay. Lydia Kraft.
So about 5 years ago, I was working in a special education program, and I worked with children with very significant behavioral needs, and families were coming to me saying, I'm desperate for support outside of school. I need support in my home. It's not safe. Other children aren't safe. I'm not safe. My child's not safe. And I would refer them to a home and community treatment program, HCT. And families in our county at the time were waiting over 300 days to access services. And I would call KeyPro, who manages the wait list, and I would ask, what can be done? And every time I called, I would hear the same answer. And it came down to the legislature had to fund mental health treatment. We have made huge progress in the last 2 years. We've increased funding to children's behavioral health care by $15 million. A child living in Lincoln County right now still has an average wait list for HCT services of 102 days. Around the state, we have 723 children and families waiting for home and community-based treatment. It's going to continue to require a financial investment, and it's happening. There's a model for doing it. We have evidence-based practices in these states. We've trained 165 new BHPs in the last 2 years, 131 new clinicians, providing trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy that's proven to help. It's proven to create safer, more secure families and healthier children. We just have to fund it. And in order to fund it, we have to have the political energy and the political will to do that. It's what motivated me to run for the legislature, and I look forward to continuing that great work in the next session.
Okay, thank you. Ed, what more should this, what do you see the state ought to be doing about this?
Well, this is one where Lydia and I could really come to agreement on pretty quickly. The state needs to fund mental health and alleviate the problem. I see it growing, and what concerns me is we need to take care of those people there, but we don't seem to take a good deep look at the root cause of this. Why is this a growing problem? How does this originate? And are we funding it will help the people that have the problem, but I don't know that we're doing anything to prevent it. And I think that's where we need to put a lot of effort.
Okay. Les Fossil, your thoughts.
Yeah, we spend twice as much in Maine as the average advanced country in this world does on health care. But we spend 2/3 on treatment and 1/3 on prevention, and we pretend your head is not attached to your body, and your teeth aren't in your mouth, and your eyes and your ears don't count. We need to treat the entire body, and we need to focus on prevention. My particular thing I want to do is we have these excise taxes on tobacco products and alcohol, and where does that go? It goes in the general fund. How about spending it to alleviate the problems we have with addiction? How about treating prevention and not thinking we can somehow cure people once they've already been severely damaged? Thank you.
And Evan, your thoughts.
There's not enough infrastructure. This problem is costing us more when we don't approach it. There are people that are in Miles Hospital that are stuck there because there's not a bed or a treatment center for them to go to otherwise. We can talk about how big the budget is. We need to have more facilities, more behavioral health professionals. We need more training for all those people, and we need workforce housing for all those people. I was just driving through Deering Oaks the other day in Portland, past a lot of where the homeless are camped out currently, and driving by the depravity that was there was tragic. I can't explain to you what occurs there in broad daylight, and there's no place for these people to go, and it's devastating. and the state needs to invest. We need to build brick and mortar, and we need to invest in the people.
Okay, thank you. Tricia Warren, what would you do?
Yes, absolutely on the investment. We have to help them get themselves righted. In a lot of cases, there are people who it's just somebody to actually lend them a hand for a moment, just to get them to turn around a little bit. And then day by day, they can get better and better and better and be part and productive of a society. But without having funding, without having support from the state, or more, I should say, it's not going to get any better. And our children in particular, I referenced this a couple of times, that that's like the number one thing that most schools want is someone to come in and talk to the children, because our children have missed 2 years of their life. And that needs to be addressed because they're getting older. So they're going to be adults and they need to have that helped now.
Okay. And Holly Stover.
As was said previously, we've made a lot of investments in the past 4 years in mental health services for children and adults. But we're coming out of a period prior to that for 8 years where there was a complete dismantling of mental health services for children and adults. So we're doing a rebuild. And 4 years is not enough time or money to make that full investment. So I think that we have to commit ourselves to continue to rebuild the mental health systems. We didn't anticipate COVID, but COVID has been a huge setback for people's mental health. Even the walking well have experienced problems with mental health. And then we have people who have organic brain disease, mental illness, and they need more treatment, more assistance. So I think we have done some. We've made substantial improvements, and we have a ways to go. So we have to set our sights on making greater investments in mental health services in this state.
Okay, thank you very much. We now come to the time that we promised our candidates, because we're running short on time, that they would each get a minute for a close. Oh, well, equal opportunity forgetter here. Go ahead. Cameron Renning.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. We forgot 3 of you. Okay, go ahead. What would you would you see the legislature doing about this and the governor?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is a big one for me because this is what I do in school, is I try and connect families and students with the resources that they need. And one of the fastest growing concerns with kids in our schools nationwide, but in Maine schools as well, is anxiety of all things. We have high ACE scores in a lot of places, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, which can affect you in a very negative way. We desperately need more mental health professionals, and we all know this. So I would like to see the state make sure that social emotional learning curriculums are fully funded in Maine state schools and make sure that they are evidence-based, developmentally appropriate. We have to be looking forward. I know that we have doubled the amount of slots for nurse practitioners in schools in the state of Maine. I would love to see the amount of clinical social workers and professional counselors that the state of Maine is putting out there, because trust me, they will have jobs here. I could fill their slots right now. These are things moving forward we can do, but for right now, this is a crisis moment. This pandemic has been brutal. These kids are suffering. We have to fund treatment, and insurance needs to be covering mental health and substance use disorder.
Okay, thank you. Abden Simmons.
Talking to what Cameron just said about the kids having anxiety, I have a niece that's in high school. She has a hard job going to high school. She has, every time she goes there, my wife or her mother has to go pick her up from school because she's got so much anxiety. Over the last 2 years, it's just destroyed a lot of these kids. But also, it's got to do with as far as the home as well. I mean, this isn't just happening. This is generational. I mean, we've got substance abuse that has trickled down to these kids that are going through these schools right now. And we need to have treatment centers for these people, the parents, the adults, to break this cycle and work with the kids. The schools need help with money. We're sitting on $600 million of surplus. Why isn't it being spent? Why did we send $850 out to everybody when they spent $400 million doing that? Why wasn't that put towards helping these kids, getting substance abuse facilities up and running? You know, the money was spent, but it didn't go where it should have gone. But we're sitting here talking about it all the time. But nobody's doing anything about it. The money that was spent, giving everybody $850, I'm sure people were happy about it. It's a one-time thing. But when you have a substance abuse or a mental disability, that's not just a one-time thing. That's a prolonged thing that you have to repair, and it's not being done. The money needs to be spent in different places than where it has been.
And Clint Collmore.
We need to invest in our people, and if it's mental health or if it's substance abuse, we need to do it. And I just want to use a case in point, and this won't take very long. A person stopped me in the parking lot down here to CM Brown, needed some help trying to get his act together for him, his wife, and his 2 children. He had to go to Massachusetts for 2 months to get straightened out because they didn't offer the service here. And I don't know how many other ones there is, but that one came forward to me. And I think that's something we need to take care of, take care of our own.
All right, thank you all very much. Now we will go to closing statements for our candidates, a minute each, and we're going to start with the sequence that we began with. So Cameron Rennie and Abden Simmons, Senate District 13. Cameron Rennie, the Democrat, go ahead.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yes.
All right, so I'm Cameron Rennie, and I want to be your next state senator. You know I'm a school counselor in my real life. I do the extras. I run clubs. I help design policies and procedures on a school-wide and a district-wide level. I've worked at a statewide level with the Maine School Counselor Association, advocating for my job and for our kids. I've done committee work. I have not been a lifelong politician, but I believe that my strong communication skills and the ability to work in groups of people that do not see eye to eye will help me get somewhere in the state Senate. So I'm hoping you give me that chance on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. And Abden Simmons, the Republican.
Yep. I'd love to be back up in Augusta. I love to work on issues like this, especially commercial fishing. I've grown since the last time I was up there. I've learned a lot. I've been in town government for the last 25 years. I've had quite a bit of experience being on the Shellfish Committee for 25 years, the chair for most of that, all but 2 of it. I've been on the select board for 8 years. I was the chairman of that for 2 years. I served on the planning board for 6 years. So I've had quite a bit of experience with dealing with issues in towns. I've been to the State House as a representative. I know the issues up there. It's not easy. I mean, the Senate was a big choice for me because there's a lot less people you have to deal with. In the House, it was 150 some odd people you had to deal with, and you had to try to talk to them to get stuff done. And at the Senate level, I think I can do a lot better, have more success at doing that. Plus, I worked with Democrats at the Senate level more than I did with the representatives. I went to lunch with a Democrat state senator and told her my views and how things were happening and what needed to happen, and she agreed with me. So I have no problem with working from across the aisle. I think it's a better position for me to be in the Senate. And I appreciate your vote on November 8th.
Okay, thank you. And Clint Collmore in House District 45. Clinton's the Democratic candidate.
Well, I've lived here in the Mid-Coast my entire life. I know a lot of people, a lot of different people. And I say it that way because people come up and they tell me their personal issues. And you don't always hear that. There's a lot of proud people in this district. And going to doors and whatnot, it's amazing all the issues that are out there. And secondly, I really worry about our younger generation. I'm 62, so I'm sort of on the other end of it, if you will. And you take my son and all of these other people, there don't seem to be anyone looking out for them. And if I can do anything in Augusta, that would be my goal.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now the candidates in House District 46. Lydia Kraft, the Democrat.
I am proud to have been born and raised in Maine, and more proud to now be raising 2 children here. What I want for my children is to see that they have a place here in Maine, and in order for that place to stay healthy and safe and prosperous, they need, my children, our children and grandchildren need political leaders who will work together for for the grand benefit of all Mainers. And what that looks like at the state level is a collaborative, bipartisan, hard-working group of legislators who are getting work done and making incredible progress for the state of Maine. It would be my honor to return to Augusta next year. I feel like I'm just getting started, and I hope that my community feels proud by the work I've done. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Merle Parise, the Republican candidate.
Yeah, I've been self-employed for 31 years, and for 15 years I was employed by corporations and companies. I have significant skills in negotiation, compromise, and budgeting, which suits me well for the legislature. I'm a licensed consultant forester with my own private business now, and I've worked in sawmills, for paper companies, in a machine shop, in wildfire management as a forest ranger in Florida, and more recently from 2009 to 2013 with the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service in Afghanistan, where I worked on reconstructing agriculture and looking at climate variability problems that they were having there and solving their issues through irrigation projects. I volunteered with the planning board in Newcastle, and I was on the board for 10 years, and 9 of those years I was the chair. The food pantry, I worked in the food pantry during the pandemic in Newcastle. I am on the Newcastle Board of Appeals. I think Lydia might be with me on that. Yeah. And I'm the past president of the Planning Alliance for the Damariscotta River Estuary Program for the Damariscotta River. And I was in the Peace Corps in Mexico for 2 years. And is that it? I hear I can go. Clean water is very important to me, and I'm considered as an expert in forested shoreland zoning and sustainable forestry.
If you could wrap it up, please.
Sustainable forestry management is essential to having clean water. So if I haven't said it before, clean water is important to me. And I was a proponent of a legislative bill to reduce timber trespass
We
and
do
soil
need to wrap
erosion.
it up, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Merle. Going to House District 47, Les Fossil, one of 2 independents.
Okay, hi, I'm Les Fossil. I think you already know that. You already know that I'm involved in a wild number of things because my job is to make this community work, and I do everything I can. I've done it for the 42 years I've been here. And last time I was in the legislature, I co-chaired the moderate caucus. There is no moderate caucus anymore. And every year I've seen the amount of dark, dirty PAC money increase and make it harder and harder for us to govern and talk to each other like human beings. So I've got a modest proposal. Instead of having the public tax money spent for clean elections, how about we tax the PACs? Thank you.
Next to Evan Gudkowski, also an independent.
I am Evan Gudkowski, and I'm a Wiscasset native, and I've knocked on hundreds of doors in Alma, Jefferson, Whitefield, and Wiscasset, and often I get the question of, which party are you? And when I respond independent, it's either met with great enthusiasm or with more questions. It's not a secret that I spent my 20s as a registered Democrat, but when I decided I wanted to run, I knew I didn't want to belong to a party. My experience as a property tax assessor has shown me that running local government successfully requires a nonpartisan approach. My experience as a foreclosure inspector showed me that the pitfalls of life don't discriminate against Republicans or Democrats. My experience working with communities to expand broadband internet service has shown me that neither government nor private businesses have all the solutions. It takes cooperation, fostering relationships, bringing diverse stakeholders to the table to find solutions. There are no silver bullets, but we shouldn't reinvent the wheel either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ed Polomarczyk, the Republican.
I guess the first thing I'd like to say is 1 minute is nowhere near enough to deal with any of these questions. This is an incredible challenge. You may have noticed that many of my responses are different from the rest of the candidates here. Maybe that's because I'm an engineer, I'm not a politician. I am retired after spending 34 years on the Space Shuttle program. I retired as the Director of Orbiter Production and Operations. I was responsible for over $150 million worth of modifications to the orbiter fleet, and I also served in Johnson Space Center in Mission Control and was part of the team that gave the go for launch. Part of those responsibilities included managing a team that solved the problems in flight. Some were easy, some were life-threatening. I came to Wisconsin in 2008 by way of Massachusetts, Georgia, Connecticut, Illinois, Texas, and now Maine. Took us 50 years to get here, but I don't think most people in Maine understand what a wonderful state this is. And I've learned in the other cultures, and I really love the state of Maine. I've served the town of Wisconsin on the budget committee, the selectman, chair of the select board, and in the county as chair of the county budget committee as well. A number of things are important to me. I've also served as a first lieutenant in the United States Army SEAL Corps. The things that are important to me.
We need to wrap it up.
I'm a member of the school board at St. John's School. Education is important. A member of the Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce. Business is important. And a member of the Patient Family Advisory Council at Miles. Healthcare is important to me.
All right.
Why am I doing this? I can't sit there and do nothing. I have to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Holly Stover and the Democrat in House District, what are we, 48?
Thank you. My name is Holly Stover. I'm a native of Booth Bay. I've spent my life dedicated to public service. I've served my town on the planning board for 6.5 years. I currently serve on the Water District Board. I serve on several other nonprofit boards and commissions, and I currently work for 2 nonprofits where I raise money and I write grants to help local people, our neighbors in need. I ran for the state legislature because I have deep passion for government, for Maine state government. I worked in Maine state government for 23 years. I've served 2 terms. I've dedicated my time, my talent, and my efforts. I'm deeply passionate about the work I do in Augusta. I've sponsored 27 bills. Some have made tremendous impact, some have failed, but I will continue to do that. I hope I've earned your vote and your confidence for another term, and I would appreciate your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
And Tricia Warren, the Republican candidate.
Hi, I'm Trish Warren, and I have lived in Booth Bay Harbor for 30 plus years. I left to go to college in Virginia and came home to Maine. I want to see Maine have a future, and that's why I started as a selectman on in my own town, and I'd like to be at the state to do even more work. I think we have a lot of work coming to us, mainly because of all the things that are going on from federal level and all the way down, but I think it's not something we should just toss our hands up in the air and say, that's it. I think we can all work together. I work with all sorts of different parties, if you will, on that select board, and it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. So that's why I would like to ask for your vote in November.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our candidates for answering these questions so thoughtfully. Thank you to our audience in person here at the Waldo Theatre and the great folks at the Waldo Theatre for hosting us, and for all the crew at Lincoln County Television for making this happen. Again, thanks to our candidates. Election Day is November 8th. I'm Don Carrigan. Good night.